Welcome, everyone, to Paranormal Round Table. I'm your host, Josh Turner, also known as Wolf, and with me, as always, is this other guy that's always around.
Sal Capone.
That was quick.
I love it. That's one of the ones that just kind of stuck.
You're like, Sal Capone.
Yep.
I thought
like a saxophone?
I thought it was Salmonella.
Could be that too.
Well, it could be that too.
That's for my zombie apocalypse persona. Whenever that happens, then I become Salmonella.
Well, you know what? We found out something today. We're in the studio, and he doesn't go anywhere without magnesium chips.
That's it. It's you never know when you have to start a fire.
Incendiary device, his entrenching
and if you get
tool.
attacked by zombies, if I get attacked by zombies, I got the magnesium chips on that. Boom, start them up. There you go.
Do you think it's as easy as they do it on Walking Dead?
Well, think about it like this:
that they could just they just thump them in the head, and their head caves in. That's like
that may
the softest skulls I've ever seen ever.
Well, true, but when you think of the living undead or undead, whatever you want to call it, they're degrading.
Oh, okay, quickly. And the bone doesn't degrade that quick. Come on, dude.
Well, it all depends on what kind of
that
virus
one girl,
is
Maggie,
going through them.
She looks so girly when she tries to hit. She's like, and she just reaches out and tries it, and then the zombies just heads explode. You're like, really?
That's because it's all this new age. Today's young 20-somethings. They gotta. I don't know, make them feel good about themselves or something. I don't know, but it's in reality.
So that anybody can just go up, even a little kid can stab somebody in the head pretty easily with a stick.
It's today's world. You look at the movies, you see 100-pound girls beating up 250-pound guys,
and little children too.
Yeah,
I don't know about the whole these zombies with the soft heads. I'm not into that. That's one thing I turned me off from the show.
I really never got into it because because
if our heads were really that soft, dude, I mean, you couldn't even be around trees. Dude.
You had to walk
around. Impaled,
walk around with a helmet. You'd have to.
Well, I quit watching the show when the baby didn't turn into a zombie and eat its way out of his mother.
Right.
That's what I wanted to happen.
Oh yeah, this is our guest.
All right. Well, let's plug the email real quick.
DasWolfman88@gmail.com
and wolfandsal@gmail.com. Send us your stories. We want to hear them, everybody, and we'll get to them as fast as we can. I'm sorry, we're only two people doing this, but we apologize in advance, but keep sending them in, folks. We love what we got, and we will get them on the show in one of these near future episodes.
And here's the deal. We have in our studio today with us Jane.
You've already heard her.
Yes.
She spoke out of turn.
I did.
We don't usually allow people that aren't part of the inner circle to do that, but you know what? We'll deal with you later for that. Anyways, so and you're probably wondering who she is. Who she is actually she was a fan of the show.
Yes. Fangirling hard over here.
That's awesome. So here's the deal, folks. I'm just curious as to, what brought this about. Obviously, speaking with her before the show and everything, she's had her own weird and odd experiences.
Yeah.
Well, that, of course, led her into the YouTube, saw Vic's show, heard Wolf on there, and then the progression's there. And so
she actually reached out to you first, right? To Sal?
I did. Dun, dun, dun.
Look
at that look of confusion. Look at him say it. He's like, yeah, you did.
You've got to understand something. I'm a vet, and I've been blown up twice, and sometimes my memory just, I think one thing, and the next thing I know, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's not it. So, it's one of those things being,
She reached out to you and you were just like, man. So I was her second choice. She's like, I guess I'll try that other guy. The other dude's like, oh, yeah, what's up?
But the cool thing is that she's, had a weird experience, and I want to hear about that. And, of course, the natural progression, you heard that, folks. And so we need to just, hey.
Well, tell them tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yes. Tell us what's up.
Yeah, I have always been interested in the paranormal. I've always had experiences ever since I can remember. So obviously, I think when you have experiences, it's just naturally intriguing to you. So I'm always on the YouTube. I like listening to, what was that, Swamp Dweller? Oh, can I talk about? But yeah.
You can plug anybody you want.
Yeah.
Shameless plugs here.
And that kind of leads to Vic's show, where I heard you on a couple of his episodes, and I was like, man, this guy's great.
Ever being on that show.
And so, yeah, I basically waited until you finally got your podcast going and listened to you.
That sounds like you finally got it together.
Well,
it
felt like it took a long time because I was like looking for you on YouTube.
In doing it until I was harangued by this guy.
Yeah, and he was on his deathbed at the hospital. So and
then I made a promise that if I live, I'm going to do this.
I guess if life has to happen.
Yeah.
I told you and Nellie that I would do it. And if I live through this, then I'm going to do it. I'll make sure.
And we did.
Well, I'm glad. I'm really glad.
We kind of kicked each other in the seat of the pants to let's just get it done and let's do it. And so after his hospital episode, and I've had a couple of my own
episodes. The people are going to start looking for that one now. Where's the hospital episode? I didn't see that one.
No, that strictly happened to us in real life. Each of us have had our own little stints in the hospital in the last few years. So the last time he was there, we said we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Forget that. Forget everything. We're just going to do it. We kicked each other in the pants and said, "All right, let's go."
Hey, I just thought about something. You're from Georgia,
and
we were talking about Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Which is set in Georgia, right?
It is.
Because they're always sweaty and dirty, and they look humid.
Yeah.
They look, and have you noticed they wear jackets, and it's always summer in all those episodes? It's weird. I don't know.
And the hair is always in their face. How can you fight a zombie with hair? But you know what? I'm not going to hate on The Walking Dead because that's going to lead to problems.
It's Hollywood. There's certain things you can't do in Hollywood because it doesn't make for good cinema.
That's right. You got to have the
They're always sweaty. There's no winter.
Not in Georgia. There's really not. We get December.
You don't get any cold at all?
Maybe January. Our cold is 30 to 40 degrees.
You got to be up in Dahlonega, up in the mountains.
Yeah, but 30 to 40 degrees is still enough to wear a freaking jacket, dude. I mean, those guys are always sweaty and hot.
I can't tell you the last time I had to wear a jacket.
Oh, wow.
I thought
because I know I've been all over the South, but not in the winter, really.
It's just the past couple of years, but yeah.
I've been to Georgia in February, and it's cold.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
It gets. I thought it did.
I went to boot camp at Fort Benning, Georgia.
You went to Benning.
That's where. Yeah, I know all about Benning.
That's where my brother was. All right, so here we go, folks. You had some weird experiences, and you reached out, and we started talking, and you were like, as a flight attendant, you can do layovers or whatever. So you decided, and I said, you know what, you will be the first fan that we ever had come on the show.
Which is very exciting.
Live in person.
Yeah, which I thought was really cool. So
this has been great.
We're definitely happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be
I'm
here.
not. I'm really miserable. But anyway, go ahead.
So tell us all about it.
So
start at the beginning.
Beginning. Okay, so way back in 1970. I'm just kidding. So growing up, I always had kind of weird experiences, and I've been kind of mulling over these things, and the property. So I grew up on a farm, sheep farm, of all places, and
sheep farm.
Sheep.
Oh,
yeah.
Mutton.
Oh God, I hate sheep. Anyway, so the farm, I believe, was Native American. I used to dig up arrowheads. All the time. Little quartz arrowheads. I actually dug up a spear one time.
What part of Georgia is this?
It is probably about an hour and a half north east of Atlanta.
Okay.
And so, just playing in the dirt as a kid. And as a kid, you don't really understand what you're looking at. You're just like, oh, cool. My mother explained to me what they were. And I would dig them up all the time. I actually dug up a spear one time. She worked at the University of Georgia, and she took it in. She worked at the science research department. So she took it over to the geology department, and they said it was a broken piece of a spear and it was a bloodstone. So, thinking about all that, I wonder if, something happened in that area which led to some activity, that I experienced there. There was also a graveyard on the property. So shadow creatures is kind of always been an intriguing thing. I saw them pretty often when I was growing up. I don't call them shadow people or shadow and you see things about them on the internet, and I think, are they usually referred to as shadow people or shadow things? I don't.
Most of the time, when people see these type of apparitions, what we understand is people will refer to them as shadow people just due to the fact that they have a humanoid shape.
Yeah.
So, and before you get going on the whole shadow people, humanoid, you consider yourself being sensitive to seeing these things, or anybody else in your family maybe have that particular talent?
No one else in my family does. I do think that I am a little sensitive, not psychic enough that I'm, have it be an issue.
Reading people, that kind of thing.
Right. But you can definitely tell when you walk into a house or go up to somewhere, like there's something there, like something's going on.
You can feel that.
You can feel it. Sometimes I'll see it in my head, which I think people call that, seeing it in your mind's eye, and I have seen a few things in my mind's eye. But and I think that is probably an attributing factor, being a little more sensitive than the average person. I think things are attracted to that, especially when you're young. You hear a lot of stories about kids and stuff. People are more open at that point, versus when they're adults. So I think that doorway is a little more accessible.
Yes. I find that really interesting that the people who see these shadow creatures, they always speak about how these shadow creatures, they see them. And in turn, these shadow creatures actually, a lot of times, I wouldn't say all the time, but a lot of times, they acknowledge them, that they're being watched by the individual. I find that really interesting. And so I've never had anything like that happen to me. So, I find it intriguing, though, that people out there do have that ability. And I don't question what they're telling me because I'm not in their mind. I'm not looking through their eyes. If that's what they say that they're seeing, who am I to tell them, no, I'm not in their body to see what they're seeing? Same thing goes like a Sasquatch sighting. People describe in detail when they see a Sasquatch, and they tell you, oh, I was 20 feet away from it, and I saw it in all its glory. A lot of people will poo-poo that. Oh, no, you saw something else. And
right.
I'm of the attitude that says, I wasn't there.
Right.
I'm going to take their word for it. Same with those people.
Exactly.
And oddly enough, on the shadow people you're thinking about, I watched a documentary, I think it was about a year or two ago. Oddly enough, it was a guy originally from Georgia.
Oh, wow.
But this poor young man, and I call him young man, he's probably in his late 30s now. But he had this documentary done on him, Netflix, of course, and he had an accident or something that happened to him where he gotten really sick. Before that, he wasn't sensitive, but after that, boom, he was seeing the shadows all over the place. So it seemed like, to me, what I gathered from it forced him to be a self-imposed, exile, always feeling like he's on the run because he can't get away from these things. And so he had to learn to deal with it. I thought that was really interesting. So it's just the shadow people thing I always find interesting because people see them, but
I find them interesting too. I think you don't hear about them as often as you do like regular ghosts and other paranormal things. I don't know if that's maybe because people, like for me, whenever I see them, obviously it's usually dark, and they're always blacker than the darkness around them.
We saw them in our house that I was in.
The house.
Mm-hmm.
The haunted
house. That was
house.
pretty regular thing. Pretty much everybody there saw them.
Now, did you feel like any animosity from those? Like, did you feel?
No, I felt love and happiness and joy and peace. And they were they were like,
the
come
love
to
vibes.
me, brothers. And I was like,
let's sing Kumbaya
no
together.
Thanks.
That kind of thing.
No, I did feel malevolence, and there were only a couple times when I saw them where I didn't really feel a threatening presence. Right. And that was because one, it was far away. And it was just kind of like there, and it kind of faded. And then another one looked like it was of a child, like a small one.
That's interesting.
And I didn't really feel anything from that one. It was just like on the curtain, like through the back door. And there were two other people that were there, and we were all witnessing it. And we were like, "What is that?" Like, it was just very weird. It looked like a child almost.
And that's interesting that multiple people are able to witness that child shadow
Did you feel malevolence from them?
No. And that's why I asked you
How many times did you see them?
At my property that I grew up, about 4 times.
What did they look like?
So the first time that I saw one, I was a young child, and I'm walking into the living room. I used to have terrible time sleeping when I was young. Go up in the middle of the night and for whatever reason want to go in the living room. So I walk into the living room. I had German Shepherd growing up. And I remember distinctly that she did not follow me into the living room. She was like, I'm gonna stay back here. And I walk in and there was this blue chair and there were what looked like legs sitting in the chair. And I was like, that's weird, but that can't be legs. And I remember that it's blacker than the surrounding darkness, like this pitch, and claws gripping the arms of the chair. And everything else is kind of undefined, like a shadow. But the hands were clear. And they were claws, like they were just gripping the arms of the chair. And it was kind of like, you walk in and you see your eyes just kind of slowly trail up. And at that point, I see the hands gripping the armchair and, just the continued silhouette of a torso, and that pieced out. I was no thanks, and ran back to my room. And then again, a few years later, probably as a teenager, walking into the bathroom and the way our bathroom was set up, there was a bathroom, there was a shower room, and then another room that was a utility room. So there were like 3 sets of doors. And I remember walking in and stopping and seeing a shape in the doorway between the bathroom and the shower room, and it was standing sideways so that it was like facing the wall. So I was getting a side profile.
Ugh.
And I remember it was very, very tall. And again, that black, and I stop and I'm like, that's got to be the door with like a towel draped over it because it's so tall. And I could see the outline of the body, and again the claws. So its hands were almost like draped by its sides, and they were just defined, not like a claw that you would think of like maybe like a dog man would have, but to me, it's like gargoyle style almost. It was just, but that's what was clear. And everything else is like a shadow. There's no definition. But the claws were very defined.
You got no malevolence from that?
No. And so there's obviously fear because you're seeing something and your brain is trying to wrap around the fact that you're seeing something that shouldn't be there. And my mind was like, this is just a door with a towel over it. Go turn the light on. And there was no door with a towel on it. And pieced out again. And then,
how old were you?
When that happened, I was a teenager, probably 14 or 15. And so, yeah, during those 2 instances in the house, I did not have that overwhelming fear. There's fear, but then having lived in my own house that I'm pretty sure had some kind of demonic activity in it, there's a distinct difference between that malevolent and just being afraid. And I don't think you can really understand that unless you've been in both positions, like being afraid because something is abnormal and then knowing that something would just claw your eyeballs out if it could, if it was able to. It's 2 very different things. The other 2 times that I saw them, they were both outside. So I grew up on this huge farm, miles and miles, tons of acres, because my family owned it. So my grandparents owned it. And then we had our personal farm. Nobody really around. And this was daytime, actually. I was a kid, probably, 5 or 6 years old. I had gone down into the meadow. It was foggy and I wanted to play in the fog. And because you have this idea. It's kind of like you're
playing in the clouds.
Exactly. I was probably about 5 or 6 when this happened. Yeah, younger. And shortly after I saw the thing in the living room. And I'm walking down, and the way that this particular field was set up, it was almost like a teardrop shape. So you had to walk down through the pasture, and then there were trees outlining it on all sides except for the side that you could come in on. And I'm walking down and it's kind of flat. And I look up and you just see something run through the trees. And I've always kind of classified it as that shadow creature because it didn't have a clear shape. Like it was humanoid in shape, but it was like that dark shadow creature I had seen. And I don't remember seeing any features like eyes, ears. It was just a humanoid shape that just ran between the trees. Yes. Very tall, again, big, and ran back to the house. And similar incident, pretty much exactly the same thing. I had gone out again as a teenager. I had horses. And I liked to go outside at night, especially on a full moon, and just go outside in the pasture and just hang out there because that was weird. And this night I had whistled to call my horses up because I didn't want to walk all the way out there. And I hear this noise to the right side, and I look down the pasture, and it's probably, half a football field away. There was a house further into the woods at this point that had a lot of lights outside. So it just lit up the woods. Mm-hmm. And I saw, again, this figure running. It was not in the tree line this time. It would have had to have been in the pasture because the trees and the light coming from the woods was a backdrop, which was how I was able to see it. And it was fast. It was just, and I could hear it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back inside now.
What did it look like?
It was just a humanoid shape again. Like there weren't, didn't see ears. It was just like if you saw somebody with like a bald person, but it was dark. Like I couldn't, because the light was coming from behind it, I couldn't see any details. It was just super fast.
But it didn't, I guess you could say this entity's silhouette, could you make out hair or
no? It was just like you were seeing a bald, really tall, bald shape, like if you had like a big guy that was bald and really, really fast, just run. I always kind of defined it as a shadow creature, but then it made noise, like you could hear it running, which is what.
Too, but I mean,
oh, really?
I've heard of them making screeching noises and making breathing noises, and there's all kinds of stuff that's going on with them. Mm-hmm. That was one at the foot of the bed of someone that rented a room from us, and it was breathing.
No.
I mean, it was this black entity at the end of the bed, and it was just like just breathing. That's how they described it.
I would have died of a heart attack right then.
But
their mission would have been successful.
Yeah, getting back to your story, though, I would say that I guess if you did hear you heard it, but it was going through the woods. You heard it.
Well, I just heard it running through the pasture.
Okay. Sorry, yes.
So, and that's how I turned my head and saw it. And the horses were not in that pasture. Like that was a separate area they were blocked off from. So I know it wasn't. Obviously, I know what my horse looks like.
During your time growing up, did you guys ever have any missing livestock killed out there on the farm?
You do have livestock that are killed, but you always just kind of think it's coyotes or the neighbor's pit bulls or something like that, because they did have some pit bulls that would get out and they would tear the sheep up, but nothing that was consistent enough to make me think that there was something
strange.
Right.
No alien abduction.
No alien.
Well, one of the things you said there was
the neck and heads twisted around completely.
No, it was always throats torn out. That's a little graphic, but that's what they do. One
thing that many people do report is that when they see dogmen and or Bigfoot running, in a full stride, they're pretty much a blur.
Yes. And it was enough to make me wonder
if it was a Sasquatch.
If that was.
Well, okay, let's get off the Sasquatch thing. I mean, the reason that you said it was bald, though, it was completely black.
Right.
So I don't see
it's
how
not like you could see
Sasquatch. You would see balding and see flesh. It wasn't flesh.
It was just, how I would describe it, because I could not see any details. I can just say that the silhouette
Sal is continually leading you that it's a Sasquatch.
No, I'm not leading. That's just what I look at.
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
I look at
That's what you're saying.
It would have been an ideal Sasquatch location because there is nobody
It's
around.
a Sasquatch.
It was
Right. Did you guys have a big creek or a river?
Yes, there was actually a really
Did you
nice
have a
sized
Sasquatch
creek.
habitat in that area?
There is, they had a little bungalow way on the back side of
Were they filming Jack Link's jerky on there?
There's a waterfall back there and everything. It was really nice. It would have been a good place, but considering that we didn't have any livestock that would go missing,
yeah.
And you can tell a lot by watching animals and how they act, and I think that if there was a predator like that around, that they would not be comfortable 90% of the time,
That's true. But what about that other creature they talk about, Wolf, that rake creature? There's a lot more reports coming out about that rake creature. We believe it's a Wendigo. The one,
I don't know what it is.
Like that one creature I think
it's a Sasquatch.
Yeah? You sure? With gray skin?
And a Sasquatch with no hair.
Like the one
he's got mange.
Was
I think whatever it is you think you see just becomes a Sasquatch to me.
No, it isn't. You can't say that. You have to say it's Dogman. You remember you had
it's Sasquatch.
It's Dogman to you because
now
you had a Dogman encounter.
I had one, but now it's always a Sasquatch.
Okay.
I think my house was infested with Sasquatches. I think that's what it was. They were just living in the attic.
They are interdimensional.
They drop down and just go into our stuff.
They are interdimensional, so you have to, consider that.
Well, do you know the thing about the shadow? I'll tell you.
Seriously, yes. Back to it.
I'll tell you a shadow story.
Yes.
Anthony, he's in the studio, and you met him.
Yeah.
Okay, he's right there. We're looking at his beady eyes and his weird smushed face. I'm just kidding. Yeah, okay, all right. He's motioning him. He's a mean guy when we record. He gets so angry.
He goes into business mode.
He does. Look at him. He's trying. Look, see?
If he had a whip, he'd already be cracking it.
He gets chippy when he's like, he gets so mad if we make noise too. He's like, ah.
Yeah. So let's hear the story, brother.
So anyways, his little brother, my other nephew, Paulito, whenever he told us a story one time, really creepy story when he was little. He was playing at a friend's house and they were hiding. And he went under a table to hide, while they were playing hide and seek. And he said that it was dark, but it wasn't like pitch dark. And he said that you could still see, like there was a little bit of light because the lights were off in the kitchen, but you could still see. And the house that they were at, I think he said it was over off of 7th Street, wasn't it? Like in that, yeah. And then and that area of my hometown, the houses are really big. I mean, I'm talking 5, 6 big old Victorian style homes. And he said that he was hiding in the dining room or the kitchen, and he saw these legs walking by the table. But they weren't any of his friends. They were black, completely pitch black.
Yeah.
And then he saw them walking around the table. Then it fell, and he said that it was completely black, but it was in the shape of I think he said a little girl, didn't he?
So it fell down. Yeah. So it was like on the floor.
Like it fell down and was right in front of him and turned its head toward him. What? And he said that it scared the out of him. And so he started like crawling backwards, trying to get out from underneath the table.
Yeah.
And then it stood up and it ran like it, in the direction that he was crawling, but not towards him. So that was really creepy. Wow. And I'll tell you another one. A cousin of mine lived out in the country out near Hearn, in between. And that's where another guest we had on the show, Lance Hoyt, who's a pro wrestler.
Oh, yeah. I heard that episode.
Lance was from Hearn, but this was like in between Hearn and Caldwell, I think, which is kind of a creepy area, too. It's all woods. There ain't nothing out there but woods. Very rural.
We got miles and miles of Texas that's very rural.
Very rural. And so he's out there, and they lived in this old country house, whatever. And I only went out there once or twice, thank goodness, when I was a kid, because it was creepy out there.
Yeah, it is.
And so then we ended up staying. I ended up staying there the night for like a couple nights, like on the weekend. I had to stay there because my dad had gone out of town to visit for business, and so I had to stay there. And one night we were up, playing video games. I think at that time it was probably Nintendo or whatever, the original Nintendo. And we were playing video games, and we hear like this bump up against the house, and then like this sliding noise. And I didn't see this, like I didn't see the shadowy thing or whatever, but I heard that. And so then my cousin he tells me, he goes, "That's the shadow man."
Really?
And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I was a little kid, and he goes, there's a guy. My cousin was very country, very matter of fact, didn't make an issue of it. He goes, "Oh, it's just the shadow man." He goes, he moves around the house.
Wow.
And I'm like, "What?"
That's
what is
nonchalant.
What is that? What are you talking about? Well, this was, I think, I had seen one thing like that before when I was little, and I talked about it in episode 2, I think, where I lived in a creepy 2-story house outside of Rockdale, Texas, and it was, we saw a shadow, me and 3 or 4 of my cousins. But this was on my cousins on my other side, and he said, yeah, it just moves around the house. And so whenever I was asleep in the living room, I had fallen asleep and he was still sitting there playing Nintendo. I thought I saw something move out of the darkness that looked darker than the other darkness, but I couldn't make out what it was. And so I just was so tired. I just went back to sleep. But years later, I questioned him about it. And he told me, he says, yeah, sometimes I would see this thing. And he says, one time I saw this thing literally leaning up against the counter in the kitchen, the bar, there was a bar. He goes, it was just leaning there, just kicked back, it was just, and it just looked like a man. And he said it looked like a man in a cowboy hat.
That's interesting. I wonder if was the house, it was old? It was an older home?
Yeah, it was like an old three bedroom ranch style house. The creepy thing about the house was it was just way out in the middle of nowhere, and the closest neighbors were 2 miles away.
And that kind of leads me to think about what's attached to a house and what's attached to property. Because the house that I lived in that was I'm convinced had some kind of demonic stuff going on.
But this wasn't the sheep farm. This was
no. This was my dad's house actually that I lived in later after he had moved out. But I always felt like that was more attached to the property, not necessarily the house. And I wonder if that was a ranch location, if somebody, if there was someone attached to that property, not necessarily the house, unless the house was old enough that someone could have been there previously.
Now, at this particular property, did you see shadow people too?
I saw one once, and that's the one that it was broad daylight. First day I had moved in. Now that house is on a whole nother level. And that was kind of what I was talking about earlier when there's that difference between fear and knowing that you are in a bad situation and there's really nothing you can do about it. I mean, there's nothing you can do except ignore it to the best of your ability. No, this house, my dad, my parents divorced when I was pretty young. So he bought this house, and when I would go over there on weekends, weird things would always happen. It was always kind of an uncomfortable vibe when I was younger, growing up, being there. I hated going over there.
In Georgia?
In Georgia. Good old Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And so later on, when I moved in, he had already remarried and the house was just sitting empty. And he was like, hey, go live there, get your life together. And it was, I had such a disdain and uncomfortable feeling for this home that I almost refused to move in there.
How far out in the country was it?
It was about a 20-minute drive into town.
Were there neighbors?
Yeah, this property was on 5 acres. So the nearest neighbor was, a little bit down the road, probably about a half a mile down the road.
You lived up there by yourself?
I did. I did.
Man. How old were you?
When I moved in there, I was 22.
You were young and it was scary.
And I had my daughter was 3 at the time. So it was, yes, that house was, so when the creepy things that happened when I was younger that kind of set the backdrop, I guess you could say, to this place, there were always instances where things would get misplaced around the house, the little prankster kind of things. But one night I woke up and there were objects in the doorway of my bedroom, just random things from around the house in a nice, neat little line. And it wouldn't happen every night, but every few nights I would wake up and there would be objects taken from around the house, and it was like every time it did it, it got a little closer to the bed. And eventually the last night that it happened, the objects were all the way from the doorway, and always start right in the doorway and go all the way to the foot of the bed. And then my stepbrother's stuffed animal was in the bed with me the last night that it happened, which kind of ruled him out for me because he was a pretty little kid at this point. And
he lived there too?
He did. He did live there.
I thought you said it was just you and your daughter.
This is when I was younger. I apologize. I'm kind of going back in time when my father lived there and I would go visit on weekends.
Oh, okay.
To kind of just lay the groundwork.
I was wondering about that.
Sorry, I know I'm bouncing around all over the place. I apologize. So prior to me moving in there, when I was a teenager and I would go over there on weekends for visitation, this is when all these things would take place.
And you had a brother.
I had a stepbrother that lived there, and he was, he was probably in elementary school at this point.
And you were how old?
I was a teenager. I was probably about 14 or 15.
Okay, so he wasn't way younger than you, but he was younger.
Correct.
And so he was just you and him as kids?
Yeah. And so, for a brief time, they weren't married very long.
Okay, and then you thought, and you were like certain that it wasn't him doing it,
right? Because he was freaked out. Like he would talk. He was kind of willing to talk about things that he saw and heard in the house. My dad, and so other things. My stepmother would like. She used to collect these angel plates, these decorative things that she would hang on the wall, and those things ended up on the floor in my room. So that was kind of weird because if it was my dad or her or my stepbrother, they're not going to mess with her stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that was the last time that it happened when everything finally got up into the bed. I used to wake up in the middle of the night and the radio would be out. It would be static, which freaked me out. And I used to think back then, I was like, maybe radio stations just turn off in the middle of the night. And so then you wake up at...
I did grow up in the age where they actually did turn off.
Did they turn off?
Some of them did, yes.
Now, this would have been back in...
A long time ago. A long time ago.
So I don't know if and it could have been, but
Well, you're 30.
We're talking
you're in your 30s, so I don't think it would have. I don't think that's the case.
No, that's not the case. All night broadcasting for most stations started in the mid 90s, early 90s.
And that's kind of it was very weird. I would wake up and the radio would work before I went to bed, and then I'd wake up because I'd hear all this static playing, and I would just have to turn the radio off, and then you have the silence and then the banging, and so you would always hear banging around, banging on the walls, footsteps. Typical ghost activity. You're knocking around, making noise.
Did you ever see any apparitions?
Not when I was young, when I stayed there. The freakiest thing that happened, I think I had talked to you about this earlier, was when I was sleeping in the living room a few years later. My stepbrother had kind of taken over my bedroom at that point, and I was trying to go to sleep in the living room. It was late at night, and I had laid down facing the back of the couch, and I hear a heartbeat. And I thought, oh gosh, I'm hearing the heartbeat in my ear, my heartbeat. And I kind of pick my head up and it stops. And this repeats multiple times until I'm finally getting a little irritated. And this isn't right. This is not, what I'm hearing is not my heartbeat. And so instead of sitting up like I had been, I was like, I'm just going to just pick my head up a little bit and see what happens. And I do this, and the heartbeat gets louder and louder and faster, just until I can't take it anymore. And I just bolt upright, and it stops. Later on, I found out that the previous owner died of a heart attack in the living room. How true that is, my stepmother told me this. So how true that is, I don't know. But I did know someone who had lived in the house previously had died in the house. The previous owner had died. How they died in the house, I'm not sure.
Was your stepmom mean?
Oh yeah, she was
step monster.
Yeah,
step monster.
She wasn't the greatest. But my father did tell me the previous owner had passed away in the house. He did not elaborate. So fast forward X amount of years, I've had a kid as a young mom. I'm kind of driving the struggle bus at this point. And my dad is like, move into this house. And I'm really don't want to because you get bad vibes from this. Yeah, right.
Your history with the house before, yes.
So I think the house, and you hear about this a lot. If a house sits vacant, it gets worse. It kind of amps up the paranormal activity when somebody goes back in there. It's almost like, this is my space. What are you doing in my space? And that's definitely the vibes that I got. It wasn't like a little bit of a ghost activity at this point. It was very much, you are in my house and I don't want you here. Oh. And I'm going to let you know that I don't want you here. You would almost get physically ill with how bad you felt going into this house. I would not go home if I was going to get home after dark.
Oh my God.
Because
really?
It was like walking into, you know how if you're in a confrontation and someone's getting in your face? Mm-hmm. It was like that. Like you would walk in the door and it was almost like you could see this just
negative energy.
Negativity just in your face, like, get out of my house. It's difficult to describe. I mean, you know, Josh would probably have an idea of what I'm talking about, having come from the house that you lived in.
Yeah.
But it was like being underwater and drowning.
Oh,
the pressure,
okay.
It was just this immense pressure on your chest and fear. That fight or flight mode kind of kicks in, but there's nowhere for you to go and there's nothing for you to fight. And you just kind of have to go about your day-to-day activities, and your insides are always just screaming because you can feel that level of animosity just focused on you. Mm-hmm. And it's just a very uncomfortable feeling. So the first day I had moved in there, I actually heard some noises and looked and saw like a shadow leg dart, like someone had darted behind the doorway, and all I could see was like the calf and the foot.
Oh my God.
And it's broad daylight and it was black as pitch. And later that same night, my daughter was in her bedroom and she was, 3 years old and playing with her toys, and I could hear her talking to somebody. No, leave me alone, leave me alone. So needless to say, she never stayed in that bedroom.
How many bedrooms was it?
It was a 3-bedroom house.
So it was your bedroom, then the child's bedroom, and then the ghost's bedroom.
And then, yeah. Only they thought they had the master suite was, where they wanted to stay. I would sage that house or particularly my bedroom, I would sage it every night to go to bed.
They can just make it worse too.
I have heard, it didn't really do anything except for it kind of relieved that pressure a little bit. I even got some dragon's blood and tried that.
From Game of Thrones?
Yeah. Yep. I just went up there and flashed him.
Oddly enough, just a quick drawback. I mentioned the guy that did the documentary. He was originally from Georgia. He said eventually at the end of that video or that documentary, he said he had to do a lot of sage in order to stop him, to keep himself from seeing all these shadow creatures that he could see.
Yeah. And I think the sage thing, you really have to have the energy. You have to be able to put the energy and the willpower and the belief into that. Exactly. Because if you don't believe it, or I don't think a big problem for me is I was afraid. I didn't want to make this thing any more aggressive than it already was. I had a friend come over one night and I actually told her I was going to come talk to you guys. And she was like, "Oh, are you going to talk about the house?" And I was like, yes, I am. She had come over one night and she was just talking. We were, having a girls' night drinking, and she was just talking smack. I had gotten a roommate at this point, and we were kind of telling her about all the things that happened on a daily basis. And she was like, well, whatever. So she goes to my bathroom and she comes back, and I can tell she's like she's kind of pale and she's kind of got this weird look on her face. And I'm like, "Are you okay?" And she, yeah, I'm fine. The next day, she kind of pulls me aside and she's like, "Did you come to the bathroom last night when I went in there?" Oh, no, why would I do that? And she said she had been using the bathroom and looked into the mirror, which had sat on the side of the wall, and the door was on the opposite side. She looked at the mirror and saw what she thought was me, which reminded me of what, Josh, you had said. People,
Seeing the doppelganger.
Seeing the doppelganger, exactly. And saw who she thought was me. She's like, but she was pissed. She was looking at her with just
straight up mean mugging.
Exactly. Mean mugging the snaps out of her. And she said she had long black hair and was very, very pale. And immediately she looks into the doorway. There's nothing there. Looks back in the mirror. There's nothing there. And she never stayed at the house again after that. And I mean, just the incidents just go on and on and on in this house. Voices. I used to just lock me and my daughter up at night in the back bedroom, turn the movie on. Yeah, and just try to drown everything out. My daughter used to point at the closet and be like, the kukui.
She'd say that?
Your dad never had, well, because her daughter's, his
daughter's
Hispanic.
half Mexican,
She's Hispanic.
So let me ask you a question. Your dad never saw any of this? Or?
No. My dad was always interested in the paranormal, but he just kind of was like, meh, because I would tell him all the time, Dad, this house is haunted. Dad,
how does that work? Because there's people that just do not know. There'll be something crawling up and down the wall, and they're like, I don't see it. I'm like, how can you not see it? You know.
Well, it's kind of I kind of fall into that category because I've never had anything paranormal happen to me. Not that I'm inviting it or anything like that. No,
right.
But I just haven't had it happen to me. And I'm a son of immigrants, so I've heard the whole thing, the kukui. I grew up hearing the kukui. If you go do this, the kukui is going to get you, all this stuff. So but I never experienced any of that. And I know Wolf did.
I've had lots of stuff happen to me.
Yeah, he was told about the kukui, and he actually saw it,
Yeah, I don't know how that works, like why some people are so open to it and others just can't see it. I mean, in the house that we lived in when I was a kid, and I touched on it a little bit in episode 2, we were experiencing it. And my dad was just like, I don't see nothing. There's nothing there. And I remember one time, and this was weird. It was Halloween time. It was right around Halloween, and there was some scary movie on TV or whatever. And it was like some sort of weird thing where like, it was like on like regular network television or something, but it was kind of creepy. There was like these people that were coming back from the dead or something. And while we were watching it, I hear this, what sounded like somebody running along the wall. And like we all heard it, and my mom, my sister, everybody kind of looked at each other, and my dad was just like looking straight ahead. Yeah, they're just stupid movies making you hear stuff. Because we're all looking like, well, did y'all hear that? And my dad's like, that's why we shouldn't watch this, and he got up and left the room. And I'm like, dude, he was so determined to not believe in anything. And then I still think something happened, because then one day he's like, we're moving. And then that was it. We just moved real quick, and we were gone in like 2 days. And I'm like, wow. And then we even left some stuff. So I was like, what the heck?
That right there was code for, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in this house. We're out of here.
Yeah, I don't know if something happened to him, because he would work swing shift from the power plant. And so I think he was like there during the day one day when my mom was at work. She managed like the Walmart at that time. And I was at school. My sister was at school. And so my dad was there by himself. And then he kind of acted weird. And then next thing you know, we were gone. We were moving. And I don't know. My mom never really told me. I know I have like a story that I think that because my great aunt had said something like my mom had told her. Mm-hmm. But I never did get it out of either one of them, like exactly.
I'll wager $20 he saw something.
I think he heard something according to what I was told, but I never, and of course my dad to this day, he still don't really like talking about stuff. He's not a real big paranormal guy. He tries to put it out of his mind because I think it bothers him.
I think a lot of people that have had paranormal experiences and don't like talking about it, because that would be the straw that would break the camel's back, that would push them into a case of cognitive dissonance. And a cognitive dissonance, just that scrambles your brain. You're like, you live in denial, but once you get that last little bit that pushes you to the threshold to say that you actually acknowledge, here is what I've seen, here's what I've experienced, these are facts. But I've always been told growing up that doesn't exist, kind of like what happened to Wolf. So that, boom, once that happens and those two things are rock solid, you see, for example, like Wolf saw Dogman. And then, you have to, and you acknowledge that, and then you acknowledge, I've always been told they don't exist. So boom, those two things are clashing in your mind. And then that's when you're like, you know, straight up go into freak out mode because you don't know what to do.
I was told they existed where I was from. I just never believed it.
Right.
I thought it was a bunch of crap. I'll be real honest with you, dude. I mean, even my little friends that had seen, you know,
the other guys.
that was talking in Spanish.
The devil dog, yeah.
You know, and they stood up on their hind legs and walked across the road. I was just like, what is wrong with these kids? You know, like I never believed any of that because I mean, I believed in ghosts because I had a little bit of experience with them, but nothing like that, you know, like it was weird. Like I was just like, what are y'all, you're seeing dogs walk around on two legs. And those stories are pretty prevalent where I'm from. And I heard a few of them and I still didn't believe it. I just thought it was just nonsense.
Until you saw your own, huh?
Yeah. And then you're hit with a sledgehammer of reality that if this is real, I mean, what else is real?
Yeah.
You know? And so, you know, and I think everybody has a piece of the puzzle and we just haven't put it all together.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Because I had an ex-girlfriend, like I don't know if you've heard the show every episode, but there was a show where she saw something that looked vampiric. I don't know what that was. Just weird. I mean, like weird stuff, you know, like, okay, you were talking about as a flight attendant, you saw somebody's eyes that looked slitted up.
Earlier.
Yeah, you mentioned that before we came on the air.
Actually, yeah.
Oh, yesterday.
It just happened yesterday.
Well, you know, oddly enough, we're here talking about that type of thing. So if you see someone with slitted eyes, you would think hybrid. You would think a bunch of these other things that, you know, because there's so many.
Do you believe in that though, Sal? Because as someone who's never experienced anything.
The possibility of someone having slit eyes and being a hybrid?
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's some facts that why I would put stock in it as saying, yes, I would definitely lean to say, I believe it. Number one, we as human beings, and I'm talking about the whole race, everything, we've mapped out the human genome. Our genetics and genetic manipulation capabilities are way beyond what mainstream media reports. Just to give you an example, I read an article. Then this was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer, where these Japanese scientists or Chinese scientists had taken some DNA, you know, particularly the stuff in those lanternfish that make them glow at night, you know, or in the deep, darkest depths of the ocean. They took that out of one and spliced it in with the embryo, with the DNA of a cat. So with this kitten. You know,
I remember hearing about
was
that.
born the whole 9 yards, but in the dark, it had a glowish hue.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So right there, you've created a chimera because that is not natural for a cat. So imagine out in the mainstream media, we're told this. Another example, we're told about, you know, telepathy, that it doesn't exist. Well, science has proven that telepathy is, you know, mainstream science has proven.
I would like to apologize in advance to the mainstream media. Please don't destroy our show. My partner's out of line, and I will talk to him after this.
Yes. He'll be whipped with the cat of nine tails. But long story short, that one, telepathy, has been proven to be real because they've done scientific tests, and they came back with conclusive evidence in accordance with, you know, their testing methods, the scientific method, that it actually is real. So you take just those two things alone gets me to say, I do believe in that.
Wow. So anyways, that's cool that you admit, you know, you actually believe.
I would put stock in it, yes.
I know that you're really wanting to see stuff and deal with, you know, but I don't, you know, once you actually do though.
Oh, you're tainted. You've been tainted for lack of better words.
You can't unsee it.
Yes,
you're not going to unsee it. I mean,
I agree with that. And again, this journey for me is all about knowledge and learning, because there's the whole truth. Will any individual human being ever know the whole truth? I doubt it. Our wee little minds would be incapable of handling the whole truth. But guess what? I'm of the opinion or of the mindset that I'm going to try. Let's learn as much as I can, as much of the truth as I can about this world.
Yeah, and I think especially when it comes to the paranormal, it's so fascinating. And for me, it's fascinating because it's something that I've always experienced. I mean, you know, the couple of things that I've touched on tonight, I mean, that's just like pieces. So for me, it's always just been a part of my existence. Yeah. Exactly. So to me, I like hearing from people like your perspective who, even though you haven't had your own experience, which to me is just crazy. Like, I wonder if you've had an experience that
actually,
you've just...
I have had an experience, but I wouldn't consider it to be in the realm of ghosts, spirits, ethereal things. I've mentioned it before in a previous episode about my little trip, one of my trips out to Sam Houston National Forest with a friend of mine, Joe. He's from the Houston area. And of course, we were out there one night and he wanted to go, Bigfoot hunting in the middle of the night. And I'm like, dude, it's like playing blind, blind man's bluff and hide and seek.
With the little blind kid. And
we're the blind kids, right?
Why can't it be a blind kid? Why can't it be a deaf kid or some other kid? Let's go.
Okay, it was pitch black. So how are we going to see them, but they can see us? Yeah, that's really... So long story short, we did a little trip around the little area where we're at, and we went back to the campfire. And then a few minutes later, he basically says, hey, I thought I saw something running on the other side of that little pond over there. So we got up and got closer. And as we're sitting around looking, flashed the flashlight over there, nothing. And then we're sitting there listening. And then we hear what sounds like a rock clack. And we'd just walked over in the area. So this area was probably about 65 yards away.
You know what that is.
Right.
The Bigfoot farted.
But we went to, so we got a little closer. And by that time he had turned on his phone to record record the sound. And luckily it did it again and got it clear as day.
That's amazing.
But that's about it. To me, and not to mention us hearing, Sasquatches from a long ways away. And I'm certain, in my mind, of course, that what we heard, because we spent about 4 or 5 days out there, and I'm certain what we heard on a couple of nights were Sasquatch, because I heard videos of other people reporting. This is what I recorded of a Sasquatch, and what they played sounded almost exactly what we had heard out there at Sam Houston National Forest. So upon hearing that and watching that video, listening to it, I said, okay, then that was a Sasquatch. And plus, of course, I took into consideration where we were, the whole 9 yards. So
right.
That is probably my paranormal encounter in a nutshell, but that still doesn't deter me from wanting to find out more. And I've always found the ghost area fascinating, though I'm not as well versed as a lot of people out there. I'm probably the least well versed out there. I found it interesting, and always the aspect of it that I find most interesting of it is that it's how do you record that which you can't see, feel, or taste, and then when you do see it, you can't grab it, you can't touch it. Kind of like you were saying in that bedroom, you can't leave. You're just there. You're stuck. You can't fight it. I said I always found that really interesting, and I have a ghost hunting buddy that lives up around the Mineral Wells, Texas area, and that's what he does on his hobby. But he goes all out, tech, gadgets, the whole 9 yards, and he has shown me some really incredible pictures. And I'll just tell you, in one picture, he showed me a table, kind of like what we're sitting in front of here in the studio, and and a chair balanced on top of it, okay, upside down on one of the corners, just up in the middle of that table, and it's black. I mean, the picture you can see was black. And I said, okay, that you know. And I know him, and I trust him, and I've known him for a long time, and I know he wouldn't BS me. He took that picture, and he said, this is just one of the many pictures I have.
See, and I think it's different when you can go to a place and explore and document all the paranormal activity that's taking place there, and then you can leave. You can go home to your nice little ghost-free house, hopefully go home alone.
Hopefully, yes.
And everything is fine. But then when you live in that environment, it's different. You become, I know that I became depressed.
You felt the negative energy on you all the time. Huh?
Yes. In that house. And that's why, I mean, there were so many things that took place there. Really, it just sucks away at you after a while, because your nerves, you're on your edge all the time. And I used to have some really awful, awful nightmares there as well. And you would hear like banging on the windows all the time. Like it would follow you around the house. So if you're at the dining room table, you would ting, 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 ting. It was really bad at the dining room. And then you'd move to the living room. And then you would hear it in the living room and then in the bedroom. It just wherever you were, it would follow you around the house. Like, hey, look at me. I'm here. Pay attention to me.
You didn't get hit with a plate or anything on top of the head, did you?
No.
No. You didn't try to cuss it out or anything, did you? Say F you and all this other stuff?
Absolutely not. No.
Okay, because, Wolf tried that.
I got aggravated and I just started running my mouth and a light fixture hit me.
On top of the head?
Yeah, and there were several people at the house when it happened. I mean, and Sal's actually talked to some of them.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like most of the people that we get the stories, things like that, a lot of these people are real people that Sal's met.
Right.
This isn't BS. I mean,
Chief is one of them.
Yeah, Chief and
Diablo and
Scorpion. They were all there. Willie. I mean, you look at the people that's happened to and that have been there. I mean, the proof is there. These are big, tough guys.
And when multiple people are experiencing things in one place, you can't discount
and most of these guys didn't have any inkling about the paranormal before we all lived together at one time or another, and then had all this weird stuff happen to us.
See, my favorite story to tell every time that he brings up the guys that used to live there with him off and on, and the first time I asked Squid about it, this is my favorite part. I didn't have to start asking questions and wait for his answer. I looked and I saw the look on his face the second I asked him about that house. The look told me everything.
Yeah.
And Squid's not one of these guys, that
Navy SEAL.
He's former Navy SEAL and all this stuff. So he's not one of those guys. I got to talking with him one-on-one and we were just talking, conversing, and he doesn't strike me as one of these guys that has got to BS somebody in order to feel I got my attention. I'm this, I'm that. He's just an easy, laid back dude, takes care of business when he has to. But I saw the look on his face when I mentioned that house, and that said everything. So I listened to what he told me about that house.
He's a very pragmatic guy, too.
Yeah, very much so.
And Tony, my godson, his stepdad was one of my best friends for 20 years, and he had some stuff happen. I mean, he's also a very pragmatic guy, and it was just like, but since then, he has kind of gone on this spiritual journey because he wasn't really like, up on it until, some stuff happened. Like he was over there one day and one of that knife trick that it did,
oh, yeah.
He was there and he saw it. So there was weird stuff that happened, man. Like one day it was about 5 or 6 of us there. And all my fish just died instantly, and all floated to the. I think I talked about that in one of the shows. Yeah,
you mentioned the fish.
The fish would die. I mean, it was weird. They just died. I mean, just weird stuff. I mean, people are like, oh, it'd be cool to live in a haunted house.
No,
yeah, no, it wouldn't, dude, because you would not know whether you're up or down half the time.
Right.
I don't know how I did it. There were times when, I'd be there by myself just watching TV and I'd see stuff move in the hallway.
Yeah.
Cause
or you hear somebody walking up the hallway
I'd just be playing
and
a
then
game or something or watching TV.
The creature out of the mirror.
I would just see stuff in the hallway and I would just ignore it because I was so used to it.
The little creature out of the mirror.
Yeah.
And going back to, in the beginning when you had asked me if I was sensitive, and you kind of see things in your mind. Mm-hmm. That sounds like a crazy person, but
no, actually, it's not. A lot of people who are sensitive, mediums, guys like Chip Roy and a few people that they say they see it in their mind.
Yeah.
Who's Chip Roy?
He is this guy that got really super famous on television, but he's a medium.
Anyways, go forward.
Yes,
Chip
Paranormal
Roy.
State. That's where he's got
not Chip Roy, Chip something.
He's from Atlanta. He's from Atlanta. I love him.
He does a whole circuit, but his name is Chip. His first name is Chip. He's an older guy. He's probably in his 60s, almost 70 now. But yeah, and he did a show where he was helping children who were able to. That was
a great show.
Were able to.
Do you know who this
that.
guy is?
Yeah.
This guy, and he would help these kids trying to, experiencing all this stuff. He was trying to coach them along in order to help them to gain control of their gift
and deal with what they were seeing and hearing and experiencing.
That's cool. Yeah, because that was his deal.
can imagine that's utterly terrifying as a
For
child.
It's very terrifying.
Especially when these spirits and stuff are trying to communicate through you and they're just, berating you with, look at me, pay attention to me, do this for me. And
a lot of the kids felt like they were going crazy. They didn't know what to think until he came along and
told them.
Explained to what was going on with them.
He told them point blank, "You're crazy. That'll be 39."
No, that's he was
Chip
actually,
is sweet.
Yeah,
I love watching his show.
I'll look him up. Chips Ahoy.
You should. Yes,
Cool.
Chips Ahoy.
Chip
From Atlanta.
From Atlantis.
His first name is Chip.
Chips, I'm sorry.
Chip
I'm not trying to make fun of Chips.
Chip Coffee.
Yes, Chip Coffee.
Chips, he's Chips
Chip
Roy.
Coffee.
I'm like, what is that?
No,
I
Chip
knew
Roy
you
is
had to be wrong.
Chip Roy is a politician from Texas.
Who the heck's name is that? Like Chip Roy.
No,
You're
there's a guy named Chip Roy. He's a politician from Texas.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, that seriously.
Yeah, right.
Look him up.
Yeah, right.
You want to bet $20?
I don't. I'm just saying that just to get a rise out of you. I don't know. Okay.
I know. I want to make $20.
Well, I'm sure you do, but you're probably right. I'm just messing with you.
I know.
I don't give a crap one way or the other.
Hey, I'm trying to make this
Chips
show.
Ahoy, Chips Ahoy. This is all the same to me.
Okay.
Well, let's get back to
Ahoy.
because we're
Yes,
digressing
I'm so
into this.
sorry.
We've been kind of bouncing around.
No.
Oh,
You were
the
talking
vision,
about how
the
you were
vision.
going to donate a
vision.
bunch of money to us and make the show better.
Yeah, when I win the lottery,
$1 billion.
Oh, okay.
when I win the lottery next Friday,
$1 bazillion.
I will become
Awesome.
a patron, most definitely.
All right.
No. So the vision. So this house, you would walk in the door and it was like this blackness that would come down from the ceiling, which is weird. And it would just be in the hallway. Now, the activity in this particular house there were no boundaries. It was everywhere. But this black fog almost that would just kind of like drip down from the ceiling.
This wasn't all the time, was it?
It was like if I were to walk in the house and look, that's how I would see it. If that makes sense.
Because you were sensitive to it.
And
But
it was
most people probably
strong
wouldn't
enough.
see it.
Yeah, I mean, this house was like you would pull up my daughter when we finally
it all
moved
the
out.
time?
All the time. I mean, there was no off button
worse,
for this house.
That's worse than us.
Oh.
It was
ours
there's-
wasn't all the time.
No, you might not have. You would have something happen every single day. Noises, talking, voices, footsteps every single day. But the feeling of animosity was just like I said. I would sage and I would sage my bedroom every night before going to bed. Because that was the only way you could sleep. And there was quartz. The whole property was covered in quartz. There was a tree that had fallen over in the woods, and I'm talking quartz as big as cantaloupes or basketballs. And I know crystals kind of amplify.
Yes, they do. That's exactly what I was about to say. Because now that you mentioned the crystals,
Mm-hmm.
of course you had it going on every day.
Right.
It was thinning the veil so thin that guess what? You can't do a whole lot about it.
Right. It's like a powerhouse for it. Yeah, I definitely think that was a contributing factor to all the activity that took place in this house. Because you hear, quartz and water, and to my knowledge, there weren't any streams or rivers or anything nearby, but just,
I'm a believer in the quartz crystals that they do. I do put stock in the fact that they do amplify those kind of things, or they thin the veil, if you will, if you got a high concentration of quartz crystals in the area. And
This
stuff.
was on the property
at
the weird house.
The
that she
weird
was living
house,
at.
yeah.
The weird, creepy house.
The creepy house. That's a good one to call it.
And what about the home where you grew up at?
So
on the farm?
home where I grew up on, God, so many things happened there. But the difference in what happened there is the feeling.
Right.
There's the fear there because, like I said before, you're seeing something that you're like, what? And then the creepy house, which is like,
right.
It's just, So one night I was having and we may give some credit to the Sasquatch story here in a minute. I don't know. When I was having a sleepover. So it's, I was probably 12 or 13. And the house I grew up in, windows everywhere. So this was, my parents built their house. The only house that had one window was the utility room. Every other room in that house had more than one window. So we lived out in the middle of nowhere. So there's no curtains, no blinds, nothing. So my bedroom had, I don't know, 5 or 6 windows, no curtains. And
so at night you just had, that was it?
Yeah, because there's no one around. We lived half a mile off of the road, and our farm was 32 acres. And then my grandfather owned everything for like the next around. Correct.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, so we didn't need them. And one night, me and my little friends were staying up all night because that's what you do when you have a slumber party. And we hear something hit the window. And I mean like, boom, like nails dragging down a chalkboard.
Oh, wow.
I can't figure out what that could have been to this day. Being that the house had so many windows, we would have birds fly into the window during the day. That only happens during the day when the sky is reflected in the window.
And they think there's nothing there.
Exactly. They can't tell. And they hit the window and they bounce off.
Right.
Boom. This was like something hit the window and drug claws down
like
the window.
And then...
Yes. And the window was very high up off the ground. So if you went out to stand, I'm 5'7", and it would probably reach my forehead. So you would have to be pretty tall to hit the window, and so all of us were like, all the girls were screaming bloody murder. And if there was anything out there,
that sounds like your episode when you were a young kid over at the
sleepover.
The sleepover at the kid who. Parents were well off at that kid's house.
Same thing?
It's similar. They all had a Sasquatch.
I didn't have this because I didn't see it.
They all had a Sasquatch sighting, but
the people that were there did.
You just talked about that recently.
Only part of the kids saw it. Because it was in that one room by the den.
Yeah, he's mentioned that he's told the whole story in a previous episode.
Yeah, I talk about it in the episode with the Ghost of Foodland.
Yes, I think so.
And just to clarify something in that Ghost of Foodland episode, I've been asked about that a couple times. Just to clarify that, if you go back and listen to it, the incident that took place where I said that the lady was grabbed into the freezer, it wasn't a stand-up freezer where you open the door. It was one of those that's in the middle of the aisle where you lean over and you look and you can grab.
Kind of like you see at Walmart when you...
They have some of those, and HEB has them too.
Yeah.
Like Trader Joe's.
Yeah, where you just lean over and you can grab, and something grabbed this lady and tried to pull her into the...
Nope.
Yeah.
No thanks.
So somebody was asking me about that, and I was like, that just to clarify that's what that was. That episode was basically just me talking about near misses, that stuff had happened to me, because when I worked at Foodland, it was reputedly haunted, but nothing really happened to me there. But I've worked at posts, jobs where things did happen.
Yeah.
One of the creepiest things I've ever seen in my entire life happened to me on a security detail I did. And I'm going to talk about that eventually. And it was a shadow. Man.
Like, I'm intrigued. I want to hear about it now.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. It is probably the absolute creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life. The dog man was pretty creepy, but the dog man was more like...
How do you top a dog man?
Especially when he saw it that close and in its full glory.
Yeah, that thing was like being close to a really large predator that you did not know existed. But this thing I saw was just of the most... demonic or something, I guess.
Weird, ethereal, demonic.
Yeah, there were a couple things that happened at that particular site that were just, and it involved a shadowy looking thing. I don't even want to get into it right now, but I mean, because we're talking about what you're doing. But
yeah, we're talking about your experiences and all the weirdness that you've had. And, overall, I would, judging by the stories you've told me, and I would venture to say that you are sensitive.
I do have a fun story going back to the sensitivity thing. To me, it's a fun story. It maybe not, but I was driving back from Savannah, and to get to where I live from Savannah, Georgia, you've got to drive through BFE. Mm-hmm. And I've always had a weird, creepy vibe through this particular area. It's kind of close to where I live, but it's like a very strong Native American association to it. Right. And every single time it never fails. It's like you cross a line in the sand. One night I'm coming because I had a friend that lived down there. I used to go back and forth a lot. And one night I was driving back and it's super late at night and I get this bad feeling. And then it just kind of escalates. And then all of a sudden there is a guy sitting next to me in the passenger seat. It's a Native American young man, and he is pissed. Like, he's sitting in the passenger seat, looking at me, glaring at me. And like I'm looking at my passenger seat and there's no one, but it's like you can see them even though they're not there. It sounds really weird and like a crazy person, but just fierce look that he was giving me was nothing I've ever experienced. It was very clear.
If looks could kill, he would have killed you.
Exactly. He did not like me one single bit. And I focused back on the road and I'm like, get out of my car. Like, I'm sorry, but you gotta go. And it took a few minutes for the feeling to dissipate. But I think about that every single time I drive through that area now.
But you still get that feeling every time you go through there?
Yeah. He didn't have a shirt, and his hair was cropped. It was long, but it was cropped short on the sides almost. And there was something black, like a paint. And I don't want to say this paint on his face was exactly the way, whatever, because I don't want to mix up what I saw versus what I'm implanting into my memory, you know? But something just triggers me that there was some kind of black paint on his face. And I don't really recall much else except for just his eyes were very, very, very dark brown, and they were very angry.
And you threw a paper cup out the window, and that's what triggered that.
Yeah, that was.
He's like, "Here's your litter back."
Right? It was plastic cup, actually.
That's exactly what happens, and you made him mad.
I did. No, yeah, he was pissed. He was not a happy camper, and I've never had that.
You sure you didn't run him over?
You know
and
what?
And then he was like, "Thanks for the ride, lady." You ever seen that on Creepshow?
No.
Yeah.
Thanks for the ride, lady.
It was a weird experience, but it was such a clear experience for me that like the image of him sitting there was just so vivid, and all the emotion was coming through so strong. So that's why I'm like, it was a fun experience. I mean, because even though it wasn't fun, but
and that's
you have a different definition of fun than I do. Fun to me is like, like going to Schlitterbahn and riding around on the rides and stuff. Fun to you is seeing creepy apparitions that are angry and want to strangle you.
Yeah, that's kind of a morbid.
The unique definition of fun.
It is a unique, yes, that's a good way to put it. And
can I ask you a question? Since you're a flight attendant, I have heard that there are, and I wanted to get into this one day, ghost vehicles, but I've heard that planes can be haunted.
Oh, yeah, I believe that 100%. I was on a plane the other day that was just going bonkers. The phone kept ringing, and we would answer it, and there was no one there. I'm like, this plane is haunted. There's just because people die on planes. I mean, that happens.
Having heart attacks.
Heart attacks, especially because your body functions differently at 30 and 40,000 feet.
It's stress put on the body. Kind of like you see, you can watch on those pilots and those test pilots in those videos when they put them in that G-force trainer.
And they pass out.
Yeah.
But don't you guys pressurize the cabin so that doesn't happen?
Your body still is going to be, yes, the cabin is pressurized, but you process alcohol differently. Your heart is, it's a lot different. And people have, especially people with heart problems, tend to have issues on planes. It stresses the heart. And especially they're sitting and then they get up to go to the bathroom or whatever after, and then they're just out, Thankfully, I've never had to deal with anything like that, but it happens, it happens, especially on these, this particular plane has been, I call it the old Greyhound bus because it's been around forever, but there's no telling what's happened on that plane. But the phone was ringing the whole trip. Ding, 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 ding. We would answer it and there was nothing there. Of course, it could have just been an electrical issue, but.
Did you guys check with the pilots and everything, see if they weren't calling you guys?
Oh, no, it's not them. Because it would have, if we answered, they would have talked. Yeah, because it's that particular aircraft is an open system. So if you call the flight attendant at the front, the pilot's going to be on the line as well.
Oh,
like it's an open.
They're listening. What is it mandatory that at least one of them at all times have the headphones on and everything, listening in?
No. Because some systems are closed. It's just the way that system is on that aircraft.
That would be nerve-wracking.
Oh no, I've been there.
Flying like all the time. I just couldn't do it.
I like it.
I think about it in terms like this, and I've had this little hypothesis / theory that have you ever wondered why you fall asleep the second you get into a vehicle after it goes not even 5 minutes if you're tired?
Not me.
A lot of people, babies.
There's a lot of people that do that.
And they fall asleep, right? But when you really think about it all, I think that it's because of the vibrations and up in the aircraft, up in the air, vibrations. Everyone has their own frequency that they resonate at.
Yeah.
So you figure the vibrational, whatever frequency it's vibrating at, that could be a factor as well.
That's an interesting thing.
Because cars is the same thing. You start droning, sometimes the sound will make you drone, but that's also, you think about it, it's a vibration. That sound is at a certain frequency. Things that'll make you go to sleep versus the things that will allow you to stay awake.
No, electromagnetic fields and things like that.
It's interesting.
Turbulence will make you go to sleep. That's like rocking you to sleep. You just sit in that. I mean, I obviously can't go to sleep. I would want to go to sleep.
In turbulence?
But you're just, that thing's just rocking you to sleep like a baby.
Yeah, I've had turbulence where we dropped 100 feet like that in a snap of a finger.
I was about to say, it's not always fun.
The only way I would be okay with it is if I was handed a parachute as soon as I walked on the plane.
See, if you're up 30,000 feet, you've got plenty of room.
Try being in a helo whenever it starts acting up.
That's not a good thing. I was in one that the helicopter started acting up. We were up in the air and they landed that one quick.
I don't mess with those rotary wing. Nope.
You're lucky.
But that's
a lot of times when you go down with that's it.
Yeah, that's it. But we digress, anyways. About the haunted vehicles. I've always been interested in. He's been interested in it more than I have, but I've wanted to hear people's stories about haunted vehicles.
I've had friends who've had some stuff happen, and I've had several stories from that. So
you mentioned the hairy hand.
Yeah, the hairy hand.
I had actually read in a book years and years ago, the UK has a hairy hand urban legend, but it's different. It was this hand will appear on the steering wheel while somebody's driving down the road and try to force the vehicle off the road. And people report
I've heard mention of that.
The hand, like the little thing off of the Addams Family,
like a hand
thing or whatever. Yeah.
Well, the hairy hand is a story. It's a Mexican folklore story that we never got into. But what it is there were some guys and they were in a little cantina and they were playing cards. And the owner asked them to leave, and they just continued to play. And then they got drunker and drunker and more borracho. And as
more tequila.
Yeah, as they got more borracho teresos, they eventually there was the manos. And so when they were passing out the cards, there were a couple of people that were there, the family of the bar owner, and they were tired, wanting to go home. These babosos didn't even notice that there was another hand playing cards with them. Mm-hmm. And the story goes that eventually the hands attacked one of them, and then everybody snapped out of it and ran out of the bar, but it killed the one guy.
What?
The one that it got a hold of. Choked him to death.
Choked him out.
Because he was the leader or whatever.
He was cheating at cards.
The most unruly.
He was the jefe. But that's the story.
That's the folklore, yeah.
Folklore, yeah.
And it's interesting that different cultures have, and even different parts of the world have similar stories of disembodied hands.
I filled a report once about, and I don't want to give all my shadow people stories away because I have a lot of them, but I guess
you can give one.
I've given a couple already. I can't give too many. Then we won't have another episode later.
We've still got other people.
There was a story I got, and since we're talking about limbs and whatever, that this woman was living in a basement apartment, and this disembodied black inky thing came from the ceiling, and it materialized as an arm and began to attack her.
Bye. You can keep it.
Yeah. It was weird. It was just an arm. That's all it was. It was just a disembodied arm.
That would freak me out more than having the whole
figure.
The whole figure.
Wow.
Because, then you've got, the disembodied arm is weird. On top of it being...
You ever see anything like that, Jane?
No. No disembodied. I've had disembodied voices
Like what? Like
I mean, just like in the house I grew up, they would call my name all the time. It was a woman. It was always a woman, and I knew it was. It wasn't like she was trying to mimic my mother's voice. She would be like, just calling my name, like especially if I was outside of the house, calling my name to come back inside. I have one memory particularly, and my mother was always outside. If my mother wasn't at work, she was outside doing stuff outdoors. And I'm out on the front porch and I can hear her hollering in the house, this voice. And I was like, I know that that's not my mother. And I just kind of shrug it off because it happens so often. I had a friend over at my house one time. My mother wasn't even home. And clear as day, from the living room, you hear her go, "Come on, girls." And my friend just stopped talking and looked at me, and her eyes were like as wide as, big as quarters. And she was like, "Oh, your mom's not home, is she?" I was like, "No, it's fine. I mean, it happens all the time."
I bet your friend never came back.
She wasn't particularly fond of,
coming over.
Because she never had experiences.
But she did that day.
She did that day. Welcome to my life. And in that other house, there was a male voice that was prevalent. And I never heard, I would hear, you would hear things in the middle of the night, but like I would just lock myself up in the bedroom and turn the noise up so I wouldn't hear it.
Completely, yeah.
But I had a friend, because I hated staying there, so I would have people come spend the night with me as often as possible. And I had a friend spend the night with me one night, and I got up to go to work. I only had to work half a day, so she was just going to hang out at the house until I got back. I pulled out of the driveway. As long as it took for me to back out, and she was calling me. She was like, "I need you to pull back up and get back in this house." She's like, "I'm leaving." I was like, "What happened?" She said that she had been in my bedroom and she heard footsteps walking down the hallway towards the master bedroom. And she's like, "I thought it was you. I thought you had forgotten something and come back." And she called out to me, and a man just started laughing. And she's like, "It was right outside the bedroom door." And I pulled up back in the driveway, and she's running out the front door, has all her stuff in her hands.
I don't blame her. That would be a bit disheartening.
It would, yeah. And thankfully, I never had that kind of experience at that house.
Here's my question: your friend saw the apparition, or he didn't see it. She heard it, in two forms: the footsteps and then the laugh.
Correct.
And she said it was a guy's laugh. So here's my question: it obviously sounds like it was very blatant and obvious with her.
Right.
Was it ever that blatant and obvious with you, or was it more?
No.
Because it makes me wonder. Maybe it didn't want to completely drive you away from there, but at the same time wants to annoy you enough. But with her, it was like immediate. I don't want her here, so I'm really gonna, lay it on thick to get her out of here.
I've never actually thought of it like that. I did have one of the scariest experiences there for me, and I can't rule out the possibility that it wasn't an actual person. This was shortly after I had moved in. I was still living alone. And the way the house was set up, a lot of houses, people don't use the front door.
Yes.
So when you pulled into this driveway, you pulled up and you would look into the back door, which was obviously, there's a big, nice back porch. And the front yard was completely dark because there's trees right up against the house. It was overgrown. You couldn't really, getting to the front door was not easily accessible. And then there was a really old glass screen door. So it was a very noisy front porch. So one night I'm in the kitchen and my daughter's playing in the living room, and there's just a pounding on the front door. Like somebody's just bam, 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 bam on the door, not on the glass. And you didn't hear the glass, squeak open and, it's just rusted shut practically. And I freak out. I like grab my daughter. I grab a knife because I'm ready to shank somebody. Run back to the bedroom, which overlooked the driveway. And I'm like, who the heck is here? and look outside and there's no cars in the driveway. And like I said, this house was on 5 acres. There's not a lot going around, there's not a lot around. And I call the cops. Cops come out and walk around. They don't see anything. They don't, there was no evidence that somebody had been at the house. Could it have been some crackhead that just walked up into the front yard and banged on the door? Sure.
Where was this at?
This was in the creepy house.
So some crackhead would be wandering around.
I mean, and that's kind of where I'm like, this is out of place.
There's also another potential suspect.
Bigfoot.
The
Sasquatch.
Sasquatch
are known to do that.
He
slap houses, all that stuff.
Maybe he did. Maybe he just came.
But I mean, it's
pounded on the front door.
A lot of them have been known to do that. The dogmen will get up on your roof.
So will Bigfoot.
And so will the Bigfoot. But the dogmen, it seems like the dogmen do it more.
I've heard the dogmen doing that. I've heard people give those stories out a lot. Not so much the Sasquatch.
The Sasquatch is a lot of slapping
likes to
houses.
Throw rocks at the house and stuff like that.
Or come up and slap a house.
I've heard of them. Actually, a story here in Texas where they were getting up on the roof out in a house out in the country and messing with stuff. It was pretty much like just a very common occurrence. The juveniles in particular were
and it's usually that. It's usually the juveniles from the reports that we've heard and everything.
But they have rowdy teenagers too, is what you're saying.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Yeah, I even heard of them like pulling people's sprinklers and getting the water from it and stuff like that. It's
unruly teenagers.
But I guess in some form or another, Sal is determined to insert a Bigfoot into your life.
No, I'm not. I'm just throwing in there that that's a potential suspect too, because they are known to slap houses and do stuff like that to annoy, or run off potential.
What if it was Chips or Roy? What if it was him doing it?
It could have been Chips or Roy.
There's a lot of cookies involved if it was him. Chips or Roy.
So what do you think it was, though, in your opinion?
I honestly feel like it was the entity. Yeah. Whatever was the
you're probably right. If you feel
getting
that,
attention,
a lot of times that's what it is.
Because it was just such a loud, intrusive pounding, and then that was it. It was gone. There was nothing else. Again. Nothing ever happened. I mean, there was another instance a couple years later where the back door was it was like the house was for sale, so it had one of those key locks on the door.
Yeah, the big heavy ones.
And in the middle of the night, the door was just shaking, and you could hear that thing just pounding against the door. Could have been another crackhead coming up to the.
But we're out in the country,
out in the middle of nowhere. No,
Well, they would be meth heads. Then.
Meth heads. Yeah, that's what we have. We have.
But they were wandering around out in the country, like out in the
and that's kind of where you have to be like, what is the likelihood of someone doing that and just coming up to a house when there's a subdivision half a mile down the road?
Yeah, that could. Yeah, you're right. There could be. Yeah, it's highly possible. A crackhead, meth head, whatever, walk down there. I mean, serious. I'm being dead serious. They could walk down knowing that you have a house down there or that there's a house down there, going down there, vandalize it, see what's there to try to find something to take in order to get their fix.
Exactly.
That's not out of the realm of possibilities.
Sadly. So. But the pounding on the door, to me, like you didn't hear the screen door open or shut.
Just pounding,
just boom, 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 on the door itself, and it was pretty loud. That probably scared me the most because my daughter was playing right there in the living room, and
now, how long did she how many things happened to her?
Not a lot. She would just talk about like the closet. She didn't like the closet, and she didn't like the house. She called it the brown house because the walls, it was like built in the 70s and it had that awful wood paneling everywhere and this hideous brown carpet. But when we moved out.
Shag carpet, right?
No. It was this
office
business
carpet,
office. Oh God, the house was just awful. But when we moved out, I had actually left some stuff there and I went back a few days later, maybe a week or so, and she wouldn't get out of the car. She was like, nope, I'm going to stay right here. And she was probably 4 or 5 at this point. And she wasn't going back into that house.
I don't blame her.
She, to this day, she's like, tell me stories about when we lived in the brown house.
She doesn't remember a lot of them?
She doesn't. I mean, she was so young. But she's never talked about seeing the kukui or monsters, nothing. She's before or after that. And that kid, she sleeps, her room is pitch black at night. She's not.
I can't sleep any other way.
Really?
It has to be pitch black.
I have times where I think things are kind of in the closet.
Oh no! I mean, I can understand why you would have those feelings and stuff, but to me, all the light, I can't sleep.
It's difficult. I'll turn the light on in my closet sometimes when I get that feeling that it's almost like you can feel it and almost hear it in your mind just growling at you. I don't know what's going on in there. But actually, I think I told you a story. I had a dream one time where there was something there. And it was I don't remember the details of the dream, but it was not a nice thing. And I wake up and I'm like, it was just a dream. It was just a dream. And then my dog is standing in the bedroom growling at the closet. And this is in the house that I live in currently. I was like, that's not great. So,
you sure you don't have something attached to you?
I hope not.
You know, that's something you're going to have to consider, in my opinion, of course, and I guess you won't truly know unless you consult with someone who's super sensitive that reads these kind of things.
Mm-hmm. And ignorance is bliss, And the house that I live in now is empty. It's just empty. And I mean that in a vibe kind of way. Like you can tell the difference. Like if I go into a house, I can tell if there's something there.
Mm-hmm.
And this house is just blissfully empty. It's
got its feng shui, huh?
Yeah. There's no pressure. There's no nothing. And
you just walk into the house.
Yeah. It's great. It's great not living in a haunted house.
No pressure, right? Just
yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I don't blame you. Hey, nothing wrong with
Who
that.
all lives there?
Just me and my daughter and my
significant
other. My on and off again significant other. But I have had some things happen in the house. I brought home. We went to Mexico or on a cruise and went to one of the ruins, and I found a piece of pottery.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Do you know just at an average? Do you know how much? I mean, Teotihuacan, any of those places around there. Do you know how much has happened around there?
Yeah, my other mother yelled at me. She was like, "Why can't you white people just leave stuff alone?"
Well, she's obviously Hispanic.
Yes, and I had told her, I was like, it was so beautiful, and I was like, you should go there. She's like, no, I'm not going there. She's like, where she grew up, they had these like practically in her backyard. She's like, you don't know what those places were for and what happened there. I was like, I know.
Lots of bloodshed.
She's like, you white people.
Yeah, it's funny how she says you white people, but growing up in the Latino culture, I can tell you that they mess with magic as much as white people.
There's a lot of them mess with magic.
They're always messing with the bruja and all
the
that.
Brujeria and stuff.
I mean, so for her to say white people do, well, yeah, whatever. Because I mean,
well, no, she was talking about me picking up the piece of pottery and bringing it home.
Yeah, I'm just saying that they do it a lot. They do a lot of stuff that they, because like I've been in Central America and was in a village where there was a tree that had all these smashed cans with rocks inside of it, and they were all tied from strings onto the branches, and each one of those was a curse.
Oh.
So they're always messing with it.
Mm-hmm.
Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, all those countries, Belize, they're all full of black magic. I mean, they're always messing with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's big time.
I believe
Lots of superstition and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, of course, as you all know, the superstitions are regional all throughout Mexico. And oddly enough, I've never really had anything. And my family, realistically, we really haven't had much either.
We all leave stuff alone.
No,
that's what you're supposed to do. I mean, that's what you're supposed to leave stuff alone. But like,
it's funny. Well, my mom's one of those. My mom's the lady that she's very practical, very pragmatic, and she's like, I've never experienced any of that.
My mom's cousin, she's always messing
but her
with
sisters, yeah. But my mom's sisters are very superstitious over, about the bruja, the lechuza, all that stuff. My mom's sisters are very superstitious about that. And my uncle, both of my late uncles, her brothers, they didn't, they were like, I've never seen anything like that. They didn't believe. And of course, her father, my grandfather, was the same way. It was like, he goes, back in the day, growing up, when my mom was a young 20-something, and my grandparents lived out like 5-6 miles outside of town, out in the boonies by a little, a little canal that they had running. It was a runoff from the river. And so to get to town, my grandfather would have to walk 5 miles. And he did that a lot in the dark. If he wanted to go to the cantina, he always told my mom, I've been out and about in the woods in the middle of the night, nothing. I've never seen la lechuza, a bruja, nothing. He goes, I've had nothing. So I guess I'm just one of those people that's fortunate or unfortunate, however you want to look at it. It's not happened to me. And if it does, I'll deal with it, however it may come.
Have you ever thought about going on like a ghost hunting expedition?
Yes, I have.
And seeing if you...
Yeah, seeing if I get a vibe or something.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. One of these days, we're going to get together and he's going to, Wolf's going to take me by the house, if it's still there.
Yeah.
No, it's still there. It's. I just went by there a couple weeks ago with my wife, and it was
show her where it was at?
It was for rent again.
Oh, surprise!
It's always up for rent.
I wonder, does it still give off those like bad juju vibes?
I don't. I actually went by there. I think. You know what it was? My wife was at a doctor's appointment in South Austin, and Anthony, it was me and you. We drove by there, and yeah, it still gives off a creepy vibe. It looks creepy. I mean, I don't, because I know what's in there.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I mean, there were some weird things that happened. A lot of weird things happened in that place, and some of it was malevolent. But what is the most malevolent thing that's happened to you in those places? Either the sheep farm or the other house.
I really can't say like physically that I've ever been attacked. Thankfully, the most I think this, you have to take it with a grain of salt. But really, with living in the creepy house, I used to have some pretty graphic nightmares that I've never had anywhere else. And I actually read back on some things that I had written down before I came in here. I think I had told you before that I had that satanic ritual in my dream, where there was a woman who was tied up to be a sacrifice. And I can see, like, just plain as day, the pentagram and all the symbols drawn into or painted. It was all painted in white on the ground. And then I had I got away from that. And then there was an envelope delivered to me with a heart inside. And there was a lot more detail to it, but that's the gist of that. And then another dream I had where I was lying in bed in that room, in my bedroom in that house, drawing crosses in the air. And the air was like vibrating and shaking. And I snapped out of it and woke up from that dream. And those are not normal dreams for me. I don't have dreams like that. And so that to me was probably the most malevolent. And it's not a physical attack. It's not anything that, what most people would consider. But to me, that was probably the
very creepy.
Creepy. Yeah. Scared the bejeebers. Yes.
That's still, I was thinking back on what you were talking about, Wolf, when we mentioned, I think a couple of episodes ago, a few of them back, when you were talking with Scorp about the city. What did you call that? Was it the name?
City of Night.
The City of Night. Yeah. Have you ever had anything to do with that or dreams associated with that? Give us a quick explanation there, Wolf.
The City of Night is like, it's a place where Scorpion was going, and I don't know if he still does. I haven't talked to him. I mean, I haven't asked him about recently
if he's returned there.
Yeah, because it was like he was having these dreams where he was ending up there, and then I ended up there looking for him to help him get out of there.
Oh, wow. That's
But
fascinating.
there are living people that are there that get trapped there while they're out of their bodies. And then there are souls of the deceased. That's what it appeared to me.
Kind of like a purgatory.
Now, and now let me tell you, there's people who are diehard Christians and Muslims too, and different religions. It'll be like whatever their religion is, and whatever branch of that religion is, they believe that that's what happens when you die. That's it. That's all there is to it.
No.
And they will not. If you tell them that we come back, then they think that it's some sort of trick or it's bullcrap. And then there's some people who just think that when you die, you go straight to heaven or hell. Do not pass go. I mean, there's a lot of closed-mindedness, and
there is.
And so that does not mean that I don't believe in Christ or God.
Right.
Okay? I just think that there's a lot of closed-minded people who are very set in what they believe, and I think that that's unfortunate that they have no.
They don't have the ability to open up their mind and think of all the possibilities out there.
Yeah, that are out there. And so we covered that in a previous episode that, there was, that's just, I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of the vastness of what's out there. Mm-hmm. It's hard to comprehend.
Imagine the vastness of space and all the stars that are out there that we cannot even begin to think or count, right?
And I mean, you've got string theory and the multiverse out there. I mean, these are more and more accepted by mainstream science. And so
that's crazy.
Yes.
But 9 dimensions?
Yes. The 9 realms.
Of each multiverse.
The 9 realms. Midgard being at the center.
Well, I think that
there's something to it. The number 9. 9 realms.
Yeah, 9. Yeah, of course. But I mean, like I'm saying, I agree with that. I'm just saying that if you think of it as like if everything is multiverse, if you believe in that theory, I'm not saying I do, folks, because I don't really have any one-way belief or whatever, but if you believe in that, and then each one of those multiverses has 9 dimensions. Mm-hmm. Now, what could be happening with the Mandela effect is maybe CERN is causing it. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But things are collapsing into each other and are joining together.
And thinning the veil along the way.
And then there are, the scary part is that there could be different universes within this multiverse, as you say, and where their dimensions are bleeding together more than ours. And so that when they join together, like you wake up one day and what was not once reality is now reality.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like now it's going to be commonplace because we have now collapsed into another timeline from another multiverse. And in that multiverse, the veil was thin to the point where things were already,
they're crossing over.
And
think
ramping
of it in terms
it up,
of, you ever seen that new Spider-Man cartoon movie that came out a while
Into the
back?
Spider-Verse.
See how that was? They were all getting mixed up in there because he was messing around with that machine. That's kind of what I think what you're alluding to, Wolf. Something like that.
Yeah, because CERN. And now here, if you talk about CERN, and one day I'm going to do a show. I want to do a Mandela Effect show, but we're trying to get all the stuff together so we can make a really good show out of it.
Yeah.
And it'll probably be longer than an hour because it's so vast.
It'd probably be 2 hours easy.
CERN is the Celtic god. He was the evil god, like CERN.
Right.
Cerna.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's also a derivative of the Latin of Saturna, which the Romans, they conquered the Gaelic tribes in Europe. And so they kind of melded together, So that Saturn, of course, was the bad guy. The dark god, I guess. What is his name? Was the good Jupiter was the good guy,
right?
Kind of like Hades or whatever.
Right.
Hades, Hades, aka he's equated to the devil,
getting the bad rap.
Yeah, he gets. That's
Hades, that's what
though.
Saturn's role was, I believe. Am I correct? That's it was. I'm so tired. Jupiter was the main, and then Saturn. But I think that all those, and then we're going into another rabbit hole here. I think all those gods and all that, I think those are just the Nephilim. I think those are the Watchers that fell.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those theories. Well, I say agree is maybe a strong word, but I find those theories very interesting.
Into it, right?
Right. I think all of these stories that are so similar through history, especially with gods, and they can't be discounted just because we think we have a better understanding, and new religions that have come up since then. Like, you look at all of these gods throughout history and goddesses and how similar all their stories are and descriptions are. And
I always focus on the one part that I say that makes them gods with little g's. The fact that all these gods, little g's, had what we would consider human
characteristics.
Human shortcomings, human characteristics. They're jealous, they're lustful, all these other things. Okay, I'm sorry. When
envy, avarice, all
that
the
stuff.
Different things.
I ask I'm constantly asking in my mind, going over and over and over and over, like, how can you have an all-powerful God be saddled with these, human shortcomings? And, so I said, so in that sense, they're not God's big G. They're not God big G in any way. They're little G's. They're beings of where they may come from another dimension or however they may happen. Point is with high technology, that's how they're doing their thing.
Well, CERN, the reason I pointed that out is because CERN, it's funny how they use that name, which was the bad guy, kind of, so to speak. And they're using that name as their project, over there in Europe where they're making the collider and stuff. Mm-hmm. All that stuff that's happening. It's obviously they're opening something dark, something evil, and they're unleashing something.
Yeah, a lot like Stranger Things.
Yeah, I guess Stranger Things.
Well, Stranger Things is based off the whole, I guess, for lack of better words, the aftermath, the things that happened, with the Montauk experiment over on Montauk Island. A lot of the other stuff that they were doing, it's based off a lot of those stories. And along with stuff from CERN, the CERN experiments, Wolf, that's where they got all this, the story. They built the story and put it together and made it Stranger Things. That's where that comes from. I find it really interesting, the upside down, i.e. an opposite reality, a reverse reality, a reverse dimension or whatever.
When you hear stories from like the Missing 411, I love the Missing 411. It's fascinating to me.
It's like a really good detective thing. I love it. I do. I love it for the plain and simple fact that it's facts.
It is. It's like a case study, laid out, and there's no speculation or whatnot. Mm-hmm. But it's very interesting to hear all the evidence and information that he's compiled. It always makes me think of like these thinning veil, or what are these little slips, or upside down, like. What if these people, and I think like people discount that. They're like, oh, well, if that was happening, why aren't cars disappearing in the road and such like that? But
when you think of things that, when you think along those lines, the veil thinning, these creatures or these entities with more power, why do they need why do they need antiquated knowledge knowledge technology, compared to what they have? Why would they need an old antique to do their things? Who cares about the car? Let's dump it, leave it on the side of the road, whatever, or leave it where it was at, whatever. But if it's the human being that they desire, then what's the use of the car? That's a trinket. So no, I think it's amazing. There's so many possibilities. We've covered so many. Just the paranormal, the ethereal realm, all the stuff like you dealt with, all the the shadow figures, all this stuff, it's really, it's just so many culprits that could be doing those, or having a hand in those disappearances. But a lot of times where they're found, what they're found, many people think, okay, that's something like portaling. You take them here, you take them over here, you use them, and you drop them back off, and they look like, they look like they've, nothing's happened to them from that one little point, and so I just find that really interesting because, for example, there's some cases where a small child is taken and, huge great distance is covered where this child could never have done it in the amount of time that he was missing. And then they find the child, whether dead, deceased, or whatever. Mm-hmm. They look at the clothes, and the clothes look like they have not been through any type of brush or anything.
Obviously, the child didn't travel that way.
Exactly. So it points to, it takes out, okay, it couldn't have been the kid. He'd have been through brush. It had tore up his clothes. It had done this, and no signs of any of that type of wear. So it's really interesting. Many people speculate Sasquatch. Many people speculate Dogman, aliens, you name it. So it's so many possibilities out there. It's just amazing.
So what else do you have for us?
Well, one thing that I wanted to say and get kind of your all of your input is so one night I woke up and my bedroom faced east, and there was this big graveyard on the property, and so a lot of big trees, and every morning the sun would rise up over these trees. So I wake up and I look out the window because, like I said, no blinds, and I see the horizon is lit up like it's morning. And you can tell, how you feel, like you've got that kind of inner clock or whatever. And I was like, God, it doesn't feel like it should be morning yet, but whatever. And I walk through, because our bathroom was on the other side of the house. So I walk through the living room, again, wall of windows. I can see the horizon lit up. Go to the bathroom, come back out and look out the window, and it's pitch black outside again. Look at the clock, and it's like 3 or 4 in the morning.
But when you woke up, you were dead sure it was
the horizon was lit up. It wasn't red, how the sunrise is often red. It was just kind of like a white, soft glow. But it looked like the sunrise. And to this day, I have no idea what that could have been.
Well, if we're staying within this realm of possibility, or this realm of existence, there are people that have, that report UFO, seeing actual craft that light up an area so bright they're like, it's like daylight.
Really?
So that's a potential thing that potential thing could be an alien craft giving off that much light. And I'm not talking a small one. I'm talking a big one, because you said it all around you. You're seeing the light coming through the windows like it's morning. So it's probably a big one flying low, but just below the trees. But it's still enough for it to, make it seem like it's the sun coming up, that it's that bright. You talk to the people in the, who believe that we live in a 3-dimensional fractal holographic universe. They could say, "Oh, that was a glitch in the Matrix."
Yeah.
And we've all seen glitches in video games and etc. on the internet, right? So if we're living in a fractal holographic universe, then our program here, it had a glitch, and then it gets set back in, kind of like in the movie The Matrix,
right?
Yeah. So there's some really interesting explanations, and that reminds me of the stories that my aunt told, and I have told my stories in a previous episode, but basically when they lived out in the boonies, around the time it was just my mom's 6 years older than her next sister behind her. So my mom and my late uncle, her older brother, were up and out of the house by the time they were even getting to be 12, 13 and all this stuff, right? But when they lived out in the boonies, my mom and my uncle were already out of the house, married, doing their thing. One of my aunts said, yeah, there was a few nights that we would be out there, we're out there in the boonies. There's nobody around us for miles. And we'd be laying in bed, and then there's this big bright light comes underneath. She said, we'd think it was my mom. My aunt's telling me that, I thought it was your mom and dad, coming to visit us, or my brother, your uncle and his wife coming in to see us. And it was late at night. She goes, we didn't know what time it was, because we didn't have watches, it was just kind of, we went to bed by, sundown, and we were awake at the crack of dawn with the sunrise.
Right.
She said, we saw the lights a few times that come in, shining in under the door. And guess what? We think, oh, they're coming in from Texas, because this was in Mexico, and they're coming in from Texas. They come in, they go outside, okay, we got to get up. Let's get dressed, don't want to. As soon as they got dressed, when they open the door, they look out, nothing's there. But it was so bright, they thought it was a car. And my aunt said it happened a few times. So
That's
Could
interesting.
be something like that.
That's interesting.
You know, and when my aunt told me that story, the only thing I could think of, what if it was the glowing orb? There's some that have, some people have reported seeing them big, some see them small. So what if it's an orb?
And especially if it was like coming up under the door frame in the house.
Mm-hmm. Well, they lived it, you got to understand in those days, my aunt, my grandparents, we're talking mid to late 50s, maybe early 60s, right? And in Mexico, rural Mexico. So we're talking a hut, adobe, so the doors are not perfect or anything like that. So, there's probably a crack under there that big. I imagined a 1-inch crack, 2-inch crack under that door, dirt floors. So seeing that light just come in, but out there where they were at, because I remember going out there as a kid. My granddad still had goats and stuff out at that place. So as a kid, we'd go out there where that little house was. By that time, my granddad had moved the whole family into town. And, but we'd go out there, and I saw that house she was talking about. She said, yeah, we lived here for a while. And so it was really interesting.
That is interesting, especially for it to have happened
a few times,
more than once. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so that's when you're telling me your story about the looking like it's morning, et cetera. I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. And the only thing I could think of in my mind was an orb. Or there are those cases where you think about it could be these scouting, these scout ships, or from UFOs and aliens. For my aunt, seeing those things out there, maybe they were just observing, and it was one of those, and it lit up the place. For you, I'm thinking a heck of a lot bigger.
Yeah, because this was like the horizon behind the trees was just
lit up,
completely lit up, like the sun was coming up.
Mm-hmm. And it's not unusual. I've heard about stuff like that and read reports that people, reporting bright lights in the middle of the forest, and they get close enough investigated, they see a big old ship out there, alien ship. So
my mind would be blown.
Oh, definitely. Well, we've had people. Oh, Lance Hoyt, wasn't it, Wolf? He said that he was traveling from.
Did you think it was a UFO?
Over the years, I've wondered if that's what it was, but I've just never really made a definitive, come to a conclusion about what it could have been. That's kind of the first place that your mind goes to, or that my mind goes to.
Mm-hmm.
But that it lit up the sky in the way that it did, I was kind of like, what could make such a bright light go over such a expanse? But I mean, just like you mentioned, like people obviously have said that it's happened. I mean, and
so that's what you thought it was?
I would say that's the closest thing that I probably would have identified it with.
So is the jury still out? Or are you kind of...
The jury's still out. UFO is really the only thing that I kind of explain it with, but it's kind of, for me, I'm like, UFO, what?
Well, it's not unusual.
It happens.
Yeah, it happens. And there's many times that people have seen, UFOs, i.e., actual ones that we're not talking, well, it's unidentified, and it is flying, and it is an object, so it's a UFO. No. We're talking people seeing like the actual, a craft not made by man.
Right.
And it's very bright, a lot of bright lights, et cetera, et cetera. There's plenty of people that have had those type of experiences, and I've not heard of too many, but I'm sure there's those people that have had UFO encounters, sightings, and also have seen Sasquatch, et cetera. So, anything's possible in this world. Just because we don't want to believe it or open our minds to the possibility doesn't mean that it's not possible.
Okay, and what about apparitions?
I've not really, besides like the things that I've seen like in my mind's eye, I've seen a person standing beside me in the room once. But beyond that, in the shadow creatures, I haven't really seen apparitions. Mostly it's noises, objects moving. I've had my bathroom lights turn on and off in the middle of the night. That was really, I blame that on a crackhead too. I was like, a crackhead just like ran into my bathroom in the 2 seconds that my eyes were closed. But never really seeing like a full bodied apparition. Right. The only time I ever really saw anything, it was like a pair of legs standing beside me. And that was pretty much it.
And the Native American, the Native American.
And the Native American, but that was to me more in my other sight, I guess is a good way to put it. Yeah, my third eye blind.
Another thing I was going to say, I had a friend that used to work with us at the club, and he said that one time he lived out in Westlake, which is here in Austin, and
kind of a ritzy area.
It's an older money area, but he was saying that there was a lot of woods where he's at now. There's been a dogman sighting that I had talked about on one of the shows out there. But he said that there was this wooded area, which isn't far from where he saw where not him, but where somebody saw a dogman. And he was walking down this wooded trail, a heavily wooded area, because as you've seen, Austin is full of wooded.
It is.
It's very wooded. And he saw a pair of legs paralleling him. And he could not see in his peripheral the body.
Oh, wow.
But he could make out the legs.
Yeah. I remember. And there was a guy we used to work with.
No.
His nickname was Shakespeare. That's what we called him. But all the guys will remember him.
He's very eloquent speaker.
No, his real name was real kind of
strange.
Fancy.
Oh, fancy.
So we nicknamed him Shakespeare, and everybody called him that. So it was just weird. Like it was like... Yeah, but anyway, he was telling us this story, and he was like, I was walking, and I was going from my house to my friend's house to a wooded trail. I guess he was carrying some video games or whatever, PlayStation games, and he saw this pair of legs like going alongside him, and he could not see the body to it.
Now, were they like human legs?
Yeah, human legs.
Oh, okay.
That's what he said, but they were like, he just looked over and he saw these legs, And he couldn't see. He didn't look up to see what it was. He kept his head down because he was terrified.
I bet.
But he could tell in the peripheral that there was not a body attached to them. So that was weird,
Yeah, I would probably just bolt in the opposite direction of the legs.
That probably wasn't, there wasn't anywhere to go.
Yeah, I mean, you can. I mean, what are you going to do?
It knows where you live.
Yeah, no.
Oh my
Did you ever have anything like that happen to you?
I've been, me and some girlfriends when we were younger, she had a long driveway that went through the woods, and she had mentioned like this woods is creepy, and this is way out in the middle of nowhere, way like an hour from town. And we got chased. I don't know it could have been anything, which is why I don't, you got to take it with a grain of salt,
Yes.
And you definitely got a creepy vibe, and you walked down this hill. It was like, and it went into this dark, almost like ravine, and went up the other side. And I'm not sure what we were doing out there in the middle of the night, but we heard something on the way. It was a creepy feeling on the way out. And then when we were walking back to the house, when we got down into that ravine, we could hear something, and we just all took off, and you could hear it running through the woods beside us, and we made it back to the house. But what that could have been, who knows? But as for seeing apparitions or being followed by apparitions, no, I've never really, thankfully, experienced seeing things. I think that would kind of probably push me into another level of...
Yeah, you'd be definitely going like,
there's only so much my little brain can handle.
And also dogmen have been known to do that too.
And I've heard a lot of more recent stories from encounters from the area near where I live.
Mm-hmm.
And now, I get up at all hours of the evening.
Yes.
And I go out there in the dark at night, and I'm like loading everything up in my car, and I'm like looking over my shoulder, trying to be aware of my surroundings. I'm like, please. Because I believe that you attract a lot of things that you focus your energy on.
Yes.
And I just kind of became obsessed with listening to these stories. And I'm like, oh my God, please don't let me like mentally.
Well, just remember the law of attraction.
Yeah, don't let me law of attraction a dogman into my backyard. I'm not cool with that.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of people. I don't think Wolf ever was trying to
manifest a dog man.
Law of attraction, a dog man into his life, but it just happened to him. It landed in his lap.
Oh God!
You know.
Actually, I was trying very hard. Since I was 7, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
just joking. I better say I'm just joking. People will be like, I knew he was doing something bad.
There'll be that one person.
And there's these camps that it's like it's a flesh and blood creature, and then there's camps that are it's a spiritual animal.
It's ethereal.
I don't know what it was. I mean, it looked flesh and blood to me, but sometimes the things you see look flesh and blood.
I wouldn't want to find out the hard way.
I mean, I've worked in places, like I said, that
I would agree with what happened to you that day, Wolf. I would say you saw a flesh and blood being. Now,
I would think so.
Does that necessarily does that qualify Dogman as only flesh and blood? To me, I'd say I don't think that's going to explain anything other than what Wolf saw that day was flesh and blood. Now, the ethereal Dogman, paranormal in the sense of spectral and ghostly and all that, apparition stuff associated. The ethereal Dogman, I think that is also a very strong possibility as well.
I kind of lean towards both sides. I think there's a little bit, and I mean, you can't discount anything because there's no way for us to know, and there's so many unknown things out there.
Very much so. Very much so. I think it's just a world full of so much mystery.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate reality that's associated with it is the powers that be, and I'm going to use that terminology, the powers that be, and many people belong to that group, want to keep people within a certain lane. Because for some people, having the knowledge or finding out about what's outside of this particular lane, like a horse with his blinders on, right? Finding out what's on the left and right outside of those blinders would blow their mind and send them into a panic.
Yeah.
It was exemplified whenever H.G. Wells back in 1932 was reading on that radio show, The War of Worlds. People freaked out. A lot of people killed themselves, across the country. There's people that were arming themselves, locking themselves in their house. And so when you have a potential for that type of hysteria, well, let's just keep the public at, within this particular scope. And if there's going to be more, well, we'll slowly condition them to kind of like a horse. You don't go shooting guns off a horse after you've only broke him for 6 months. You've got to work him into that. You don't just throw it right on him the first day you throw a saddle on and you're starting to work. And you've got to work them into the shooting so that they don't flinch every time you shoot.
Yeah.
And so and people, it's the same thing. So small increments, of exposure.
Desensitizing.
Yeah. Yes, that is the proper terminology.
So, with all that being said, we are going to bring this to a close.
Oh, yes. And we've had quite the show with this, our very first guest.
Yay.
In studio, doing it, for lack of better words, person to person, live.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, you were the first fan that came to actually, that's pretty cool.
It's very exciting. Yeah.
Well,
I've really enjoyed it.
Had you here.
This has been a great experience.
A good discussion.
Definitely. You've had a lot more creepy experiences. I bet you're going to get home, tonight.
I've got more.
And you're going to figure out like, oh my God, I didn't say this. I didn't say that.
So you got more?
I mean, yeah. I mean, my whole life has just been a hodgepodge of.
Well, here's your homework for the next time, we have a chance to get you back on live. is just write yourself a list of like they say, make your own little cheat sheet, your little notes, so that way you can go down all the ones you didn't tell us that you remember.
I made a list to bring, and then I lost it. Somebody found it. They're probably going to look at that list and be like, "What the hell?"
They turn it into your boss.
Yeah, they'll be like,
"This is the person you have helping people at 30,000 feet."
You need to lock her in one of those back
needs
rooms.
A jacket, the kind that straps around the back.
Yes, and needs the guys in the white suits, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think I went over most of the fun stuff, but there's so many little things that happen to you and so many things that just happen that you just you don't really pay attention to them because they happen so often. And then you just kind of remember the thing. Exactly. And you know what? And I think y'all mentioned that on an episode once with the house that you had lived in. Stuff happens so much that you become desensitized to it. So you're just kind of like, oh God, what's happening now? You
also learn to ignore a lot of it. The little teeny tiny stuff. Exactly. Yeah, that's what Wolf was saying. Some of that stuff you learn to ignore
crazy if you don't.
Losing your keys and your checkbook.
Yeah.
And then you look at your checkbook and you're like, I had more money in the bank than that ghost. Mm-hmm. It took all my money and spent it on
all the money.
Yeah, and then it hit you on top of the head with a light fixture too. Yeah. Just to boot. So, folks, thank you for being with us, and we thank Jane.
You, Jane. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
This has been really fun.
Remember to like, subscribe, and comment, and tell your friends.
Yeah,
turn them on to the show.
Good stuff, or we will,
we will report you to the Federation, and
you will be attacked by our troll army that we have apparently.
And the Emperor, and the Emperor will call his Dark Lords of the Sith to come visit you. So I don't know, but anyways, thank you.
The Federation. You're mixing Star Wars with Star Trek. What are you doing?
No,
you're gonna make so many people mad with that, dude. You can't do that.
So I can too.
Captain Kirk, I'm your father. Like, dude, come on, man. What are you doing? This is.
Dang it, Kenobi. I'm a doctor.
What is it like? This is a Star Destroyer of the USS Enterprise.
Something like that. Picard was pretty good. But anyways, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.